Sir, how much money does Bell Media or CTV News receive in annual subsidies from Justin Trudeau's Liberal government?
Unlike the CBC, CTV nor CTV News receive any subsidies from the government. In fact, we're required to spend at least 30% of our annual revenue each year, which amounts to $1.2 billion since 2011 on Canadian programming expenditures. At the same time as all of this, we are losing $185 million a year on our television operations, including a loss of $40 million on news alone.
So CTV hasn't received any regulatory relief or no wage relief in the last 9 years. Is that your contention?
We receive no subsidies from the government.
The question was regulatory relief or subsidies for wages in the last 9 years?
So there was a decision made by the federal government recently that amounted to having a $40 million impact on Bell Media, but it was not a subsidy. It was, in fact, the elimination of a tax on our revenues that had existed since 1997.
$40 million in regulatory relief. I will skip ahead of you, and $122 million in subsidies for wages. So I want to talk about, pardon me?
The $40 million was not a subsidy.
Sir, you're correcting something that I didn't say. So let's just get off on the right foot here. I referred to it as regulatory relief. $40 million in regulatory relief. Did you receive $40 million in regulatory relief?
We received $40 million in relief through the elimination of a tax.
Okay. So I have a sense of how this is going to go. So let's go. We've seen a lot of examples of CTV activism masquerading as journalism. And I want to give you a couple examples of that. On May 29th of this year, you published a story that was titled, "Poilievre Panned for Video Saying Canadians Fleeing for Nicaragua." Now, of course, this story was about the leader of the opposition talking to Canadians who are suffering after 9 years of a government whose economic vandalism has made it all but impossible for millions of Canadians to survive here. But on April the 2nd, just days later, when RBC releases a report on housing trends and affordability, toughest time ever to afford a home as soaring interest costs keep raising the bar, again detailing the results of 9 years of life under the NDP Liberals, we don't see that. We don't see a story. I don't have a story to offer you from CTV on that, which speaks to the experience that Mr. Poilievre had related about those Canadians. And then, of course, we have the most recent example of the blatant disinformation spread by your network. This disinformation that was perpetrated on Canadians was spread on across your platforms, where instead of the message that Mr. Poilievre had given, which is what we hear from millions of Canadians, and that's the need for a carbon tax election when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves, you altered it to you altered that quote from Mr. Poilievre into one that reflected talking points from Justin Trudeau's Prime Minister's office. So we wouldn't know about that most recent case if you weren't called out by a Conservative staffer. And you said you're sorry, but we know that you're only sorry that you got caught. Isn't that right?
I disagree with your characterization.
So are you sorry?
We have apologized twice for a mistake that occurred. We have
back and reviewed all of your coverage of Mr. Poilievre and his discussions about the Trudeau Liberals' carbon tax on everything that they plan to, of course, quadruple, raising the price of gas to 60 cents a litre. That's seen 1 in 4 Canadians not know where their next meal is coming from. Food bank use skyrocket to records never seen before in this country. Have you gone back and reviewed all of your coverage of Mr. Poilievre, or will it be incumbent on Conservatives to have to go through and review historically the disinformation that CTV has perpetrated on Canadians, or or is that something that CTV is going to proactively do? Because I can assure you, sir, that going forward, we know that we now need to do this not just for ourselves, but for Canadians, because certainly the trust has been broken.
I want to give Mr. Grayson a chance to answer that, Mr. Barrett. Go ahead.
So thank you. I disagree with the
left.
characterization that we are engaged in a campaign of disinformation with respect to Canadians. It's our job to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way so Canadians can make informed decisions on them. That's what we do consistently on a daily basis. This particular issue that happened on September the 22nd,
sir,
was a very rare and unique occurrence.
Well, I'd be interested to know I would be interested to know how you verified that it was rare if you didn't go back and review all of the other instances of coverage. Like I said, I'd like you to tell us now, though, do you think it's appropriate for other media organizations that have criticized that Conservatives called out this disinformation when you yourself admitted that you were wrong? The question is, do you think it is appropriate for other media outlets to have criticized this disinformation having been called out?
Quick response, please, Mr. Gray.
It's not for me to suggest how other media outlets operate. My job is to manage CTV News.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Oh, God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just have to go back to what you said. You said that the clip was altered. You showed Canadians something that never happened. And you're telling me now that there was no intent to misinform Canadians, and that the reason for that altering of a clip was because it had to be cut down for time. So the words that were cut out were carbon tax election. Okay, now I just timed myself. That took about 1.2 seconds. So you're telling me that there was no intent to misinform Canadians and they had to cut this down for length, and that it would be understood that the quote from the Conservative leader was about a carbon tax election, even though you removed the words carbon tax election. Can you understand how we're having a very difficult time accepting that?
So I want to be clear. What I indicated was that was the explanation offered by the individual involved. That was not my explanation as to what transpired.
Do you accept that? Or do you believe it was deliberately done to mislead Canadians?
I do not believe that it was deliberately done, but
Okay,
still, there was a violation of our editorial standards. So these two individuals are no longer part of it.
Do you accept the explanation that was given to you?
We have made a decision that due to the violation of our editorial standards, that these individuals are no longer part of CTV News.
So what do you believe the motive was?
It is not for me to determine what the motive was.
Okay. Is CTV News's viewership increasing or decreasing year over year? Would the viewership this year be higher or lower than last year?
There has been a consistent erosion in viewership in broadcast media in this country for a number of years. It's falling year over year.
I wonder why, when you get caught putting things on the air that you then have to admit never actually happened. I can understand why viewership as well as trust would erode. I can
give you a couple of specifics.
Sorry, I only have about a minute left, so I just want to understand one thing. Does CTV News have a diversity target?
Our goal is to reflect Canada, and the current visible minority percentage in this country, according to the 2021 census, is 26%.
Do you have a target for diversity of political viewpoints at CTV News?
It's our job, as I said earlier, to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way.
That doesn't answer the question. Do you have a specific policy to ensure that the editorial direction, the journalists, and the producers at CTV News reflect the Canadians' political spectrum?
It's not the job of journalists to reflect the Canadian political spectrum. It's our job to present stories in an unbiased, balanced, accurate, and fair way.
No, but you're telling me you have no way of determining whether or not the producers, the editors, and the journalists all have the same liberal bias. You have no way to determine that.
Quick response, Mr. Gray, please.
Our team do not have a liberal bias.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scheer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, you have repeatedly stated here today that you believe that there was no intent to mislead. Let's look at what happened. CTV spliced together 3 short sound bites. Sound bites spliced together, not even in the order that they were stated, to create an entirely made-up sentence, literally fake news, that entirely changed the meaning of what Pierre Poilievre said. So, on what basis do you conclude that there was no intent to mislead? On what basis exactly?
2 now former staff members of CTV News acted in a way that was in breach of our editorial standards.
You made a conclusive statement that there was no intent to mislead. So I'm asking you, on what basis do you draw that conclusion?
Based on 33 years of experience, and this being the first and only
Mr. Gray,
time
no one
anything like
believes
this
you.
has
And
ever
you
happened.
said, for example, that the employee who altered the video, one of the 2 employees, said that he or she believed that it would be understood to be about the carbon tax election. Yet nowhere in the report is there any mention of the carbon tax election. So on what basis could anyone reasonably believe that that statement was made in that context when there was no context? Quite the opposite, disinformation.
I disagree.
It's a fact that there was no mention of a carbon tax election. You have no credibility, and in the face of the fact that CTV peddled a fraudulent news story, and you haven't apologized, you haven't explained the basis upon which you have asserted that there was no intent to mislead, to simply say you disagree isn't good enough. No one believes you.
We have, in fact, apologized twice.
You haven't apologized at all. You said there was no intent to mislead. No intent to mislead, but you can't even articulate the basis of why.
There was no intent to mislead. We have apologized
Say that,
twice.
but I asked you to provide a basis, and you haven't been able to provide a
2:30.
basis.
2:30. Go ahead, Mr. Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, I take issue with something that you said, and it's actually been said a number of times at this committee. You characterized this as a mistake. Do you stand by that?
It was the violation
Sir,
of
I asked
our
you,
editorial
was this
standards.
a mistake? You've said that before. You stand by the fact it was a mistake. Is that correct?
I stand by the fact that
Sir,
this story went to air in a way that it shouldn't
Sir,
have.
no, you have called it a mistake. And with all due respect, a mistake is when I put milk in my coffee instead of cream. This was a massive error in judgment. This was a previously unforeseen breach of trust from what was once a trusted media organization. And you have said, picking up on what Mr. Cooper said, the explanation given was not to mislead Canadians. Sir, do you even believe that?
I stand by my testimony today wholeheartedly and unreservedly.
You stand by your testimony that the intent was not to mislead Canadians. Did you talk to these people and get their motives, sir?
There was a fulsome investigation.
But I asked whether,
what transpired.
sir, with all due respect, I didn't ask whether there was an investigation. I asked whether you spoke with them. Yes or no?
I did not speak with them beyond having an initial conversation with the reporter the night that this was brought to our attention.
So you had a brief initial conversation, and based on that, you come to committee and say that there was no malevolent intent to mislead based on that. And I ask whether you believe that, and you stand by it. With all due respect, sir, that is an untenable claim that you have arrived at. We are getting ready here for a carbon tax election. At the end of the day, is there one thing that you have done, that you have implemented to ensure that this won't happen again? Just one thing.
Yes, we've terminated 2 individuals.
No, sir, you have countless other employees. I mean, that was possibly the worst answer you could have given. What about moving forward? That is retrospective. What about moving forward? Because, sir, this is what I can say. Why is it that it always is the Conservatives that are fighting this battle? Why is it? Why is it that when it comes to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they are not misquoted, but when it comes to Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, this type of thing can happen, and that is shameful.
I'm going to have to end it there.
I disagree with the characterization.
Okay, thank you.